Rubrics. Have you ever seen one of those rubrics with like 50 questions and 5 or 6 categories on each of those questions? And it was just so monumental that you didn't even know how you were going to use it to grade, much less the kids actually understand what they were supposed to do. Well, today we are focusing on rubrics, and we're going to discuss in episode 415 5 questions to ask when we use rubrics. Hope this helps.
The 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with Vicki Davis. Every weekday, you'll learn powerful, practical ways to be a more remarkable teacher today.
Today, we're talking with Dr. Scott N. Forrest from California. He was 2015 Online Course Design Award winner for the Blended Schools Network. And Scott, today, we are talking about 5 questions we ask while using rubrics. Where do we start? What's our first question?
The first question our English department uses is beginning with the Common Core Standards. We ask, according to the Common Core Standards, what student skills and outcomes are most important? And then these skills and outcomes become our priority skills. And these are the skills that we end up writing into our rubrics.
Well, isn't it a mistake that some people try to focus on everything?
Oh, that was our big mistake. We were not only overwhelmed as teachers, but we were also overwhelming our students. So we wanted to make sure we were all focused, teachers and students, on what the priority skills are. So that's what got us into rubrics in the first place, was to get us focused on these skills.
So how many priority skills do you usually choose? Are you just looking at 2 or 3 or 8 or 10 or how many?
For example, we look at each different part. So example, in writing, we want to choose maybe 3. And even then, there might be 3 skills within one full standard.
So you're focusing.
Exactly. We want to make sure everybody is clear on the skills we're working on at the moment. So we're not trying to do everything all at once.
You know, when I see a 2 or 3 page rubric for a high school student, I think, how can the student focus, much less the teacher?
That's exactly our point. We also wanted to make sure we're together as a department, teachers and students. And this way, this actually brings us to question 2 of how are we ensuring our students are learning these priority skills? So when we find these priority skills, we create rubrics and we make sure these skills are very clear in the rubric for that particular assignment. And this keeps us really focused. So as we're teaching and conferencing with the students, we can look at each individual skill that we're focusing on at the moment, and that keeps us from getting off track.
Now, you said something interesting, at the moment, and as you know, in writing, there's often a revision process. Might your rubric change? So you might have one rubric for revision 1 and another rubric for revision 2, and have different skills at that moment that you're focusing on?
We'll focus on the skill, and we will help the students revise as we're writing. So we even encourage students, before you even turn in the first submission, we're here as teachers to facilitate the process. We'll help you with it. We'll give feedback 2 or 3 times before the student feels comfortable to turn it in that first time. So the rubric acts as the conversation starter, and we'll base our conversations and feedback with the rubric open as the students are working on their first drafts.
Oh, I love that, because revision and conversation about it, folks who just turn in one paper, get a rubric and hand it back are just missing out on the whole process of writing, right?
Exactly. And when we first began using rubrics, of course, we knew there's an ease to grading with it, and we can grade really quickly. But more importantly, we really wanted to use rubrics to improve our instruction and ultimately improve the academic skills of the students. So we wanted to get beyond just marking the rubric, handing it back, and that's the end of it.
Love that. What's our third question?
So as we were look over the rubrics, and especially after we grade the first submissions, we look at the data we get from the rubrics and we ask ourselves, what is working well for the students and what are the areas of needed improvement? And we kind of touched on this before, so we can disaggregate the data based on these priority skills. For example, a student may write a thesis statement really well, and we can give positive feedback there. But then we might see they're not supporting their thesis statement with a lot of evidence. So the student then can focus on that area of finding more or better evidence to support the thesis that they already know well.
Excellent. And so you have an attitude of improvement in coaching and learning, and that's fantastic. Okay, what's the fourth question?
So then, based on the results of these first three questions, we ask ourselves, then what should we revise, change, or keep the same? Because we've also learned we may think we write the most perfect rubric that's understandable to all. But then as we're conferencing with students, they may come up with questions or some confusions from our rubrics, so we may have to revise our rubrics to be more clear. For example, when we say state a claim, students may not be exactly sure what we mean by claim. So we want to be very clear with the students based on the levels they're at the moment. So instead of using the word claim, we might use the word write an argument that you can support with evidence. And then as they're more comfortable with that, then we'll bring in more academic language.
Well, they certainly understand argument if you're working with teenagers.
Exactly, yes.
What's our fifth one, Scott?
And then once we go through this process, we're always asking ourselves, what are our next steps for instructional improvement and student learning? So we've noticed with using these rubrics, it's great for conversations, great for coaching, but we're also seeing students beginning to take more ownership of their learning. So now with our next steps with rubrics, we're really wanting to see how we can use rubrics to bring more independent learning to the students so they take ownership of that and so that they start thinking about how they're approaching each skill and how they're showing whether or not they know each skill. So we're really looking to use rubrics to take the onus off the teachers and put it more on the students so they become more confident.
I think this is so important. I was at a school once and they said, we're really struggling with teaching critical thinking because we've rubriced everything to the point that the kids just check off the checklist, and our rubrics have not evolved and changed with the kids. They're just the same rubrics the whole year. And while that may sound nice from a practical perspective, the truth is if students are growing and learning, then those rubrics should grow to reflect the stage of learning. Would you agree with that, Scott?
Oh, I definitely agree that rubrics are dynamic because as students analyze rubrics, they begin realizing when they're more comfortable with the skills and they can see both in their own writing as well as in the rubric when they have mastered skills. And so we also listen to the students on what are they ready for next. They might begin asking, well, I feel like I'm using enough evidence and I'm organized, but I'm not sure I'm hitting my targeted audience. So then we'll revise our rubrics to help them with the skills of targeting specific audiences in their writing. So we'll move along and improve our instructional strategies as the students improve their skills.
I love this. So there's just so much meat here about effective rubrics. And I love what you said. And I think all of us need to ask ourselves, are our rubrics dynamic? Are we meeting? Are they changing? Are they improving? Are they leveling up? And do they reflect the growth of our students as well as the growth of our teaching process? Scott, this is great. Thank you so much. So did you know that I have a weekly newsletter that is the best content that I share that goes to your email box. If you're interested in signing up for the weekly newsletter, go to coolcatteacher.com/newsletter. It is free, and not only share the current trends and current things I'm reading and important news that you need to get a listen to, but also a little bit about what I'm doing in my classroom if you're just kind of curious. So I hope you'll join me at coolcatteacher.com/newsletter. The other cool thing is when you get the newsletter, and if you have any questions, you can just hit reply and it'll go right to my email box. So I hope it's helpful. More than 10,000 people are on the newsletter now, and it's growing. If you have suggestions, as always, for things you want covered on the 10-Minute Teacher or blog post you'd love to hear me write, feel free to email me at Vicki@coolcatteacher.com. I do appreciate all of the support in the emails that many of you have sent me as we have been recovering from Hurricane Michael. Things are going a lot better. We have a new HVAC. We got that around December 16th. So we had a little over 2 months without central heating and air, and it was cold too in South Georgia, kind of surprisingly. And we've got some other things handled. We've still kind of got a muddy yard, but definitely a new perspective on life. And it's amazing sometimes when the storms of life come, just how much joy that comes from remembering what's important. And you know what? Part of what I do, encouraging you, remarkable educators out there, you're important. I got a note from an awesome educator in Lebanon the other day talking about just encouraging me. And I got one the other day from South Africa and some other places. And it just really blows my mind. But I will say this, those kind of notes kind of keep me going because I'm a full-time teacher, just like most of you. And I work all day. And this is just a calling. I can't help it. I get to interview all these awesome educators from around the world, and they inspire me and encourage me. And it just makes me so proud of our profession and what we do every day. So get out there and be remarkable. I hope you innovate like a turtle, and I just hope you smile all day long. Yes, I know our job is hard, but you know what? It's worth it.
Thank you for listening to the 10-Minute Teacher podcast. You can download the show notes and see the archive at coolcatteacher.com/podcast. Never stop learning.